Alright, so today we're going to do some trees. I did my color swatches yesterday. We'll talk briefly about these guys and why they're hanging out with me. And I'm going to go over my setup real quick and then we'll get started. I do have a dedicated water glass so I don't get paint all over my nice glassware. This is my awesome little pipette. This is what I use to distribute water. The cat also loves it, which is problematic. I do have, some of the trees I've painted in the past, because that's what I'm painting today is trees, just as well, apparently I don't have that one anymore. Reference photos, and I've got my palette. Hey, Shanna. Just gonna stick this guy back up here. So yesterday we did these. These are my color swatches. This is the color palette I'm using for this client. There were a ton of colors involved for this Utah wedding. So because their color palette technically has like 10 colors in it, all like analogous colors, that go well together pretty obviously, from like yellows, light yellows into peaches and corals, and then some blues and sages. So a really great color palette to be working with, but because there are so many colors and because I'm doing trees, that I've got a decent amount of real estate as far as color possibilities go. I wanted to do some of my color swatches first to play with some of the colors, see how they interacted with each other. Like this orange here kind of got a little bit muddy with that purple, so I'm going to be careful of that. This blue kind of puddled a little bit because I had too much water on that guy. But I don't necessarily love how it dried with the other colors, so I'm going to avoid that combination as well. So this is a really good way of playing with colors and finding either new color combinations or testing your paints out to see which paints are going to work well with what other shades. I am not going to be using an overhead down camera because otherwise I can't see the screen. So I'm going to be starting out with some smaller versions of what I'm going to be eventually painting. I'm going to do this as a quad. I'm going to do 4 different pieces on this particular page right here. Basically, this is going to be my interim between my color swatches and my final piece, because I'm going to still use this as kind of a test model. So I'm going to do wet on wet. So I'm going to start with just a quad. I'm not taping it down. I'm not worried about straight lines. I'm just using this as a workspace to test out some tree styles, some colors, and then whichever ones I like the best, those will be the ones that I will take into our final piece. As far as like developing your own style, you can see my water on there. Developing your own style or developing a style specific to a client, this is a really great way of doing it, is getting some artwork done, letting it dry, walking away, coming back, and kind of analyzing it in like a nice positive way, not in a critical way, and that's what we're going to do today. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with my lightest colors, because that's going to be my background. I am going to start with some of my sagey greens and my peaches right down along this bottom border here. I should have marked where my edge of my water got. As I continue working on these, by the time I get to the 4th one, my water will be tinted enough that I'll be able to see where I've laid it down. And this is not a quarter. This is way too big. That's fine. We're just working. So again, the reason I'm not doing a down-facing camera is so I can see questions and comments, which if you do have, feel free to ask. I'm gonna grab a pencil real quick and mark my border. Because I keep painting over the edge. There's my border. And I still did it, jeez. That's fine. And make sure my background is nice and saturated, because I definitely want this first layer to be nice and wet. And then we're going to come in with our first layer of trees, which will be our really pale ones. I actually really prefer when my wash in the background has a tint to it. Not only is it easier to see when I'm working on it, but it adds a little bit more depth. So by the time we get to our final piece, and by the time we get to this bottom one down here, that's what it'll be more like. Moving my water over because I'm like carrying my wet paintbrush on top of my artwork. Shayna, it's like I knew what you were gonna ask. I don't usually do wet on wet. I usually do dry on wet, so it's just a different style of watercolor. And it's been a long time since I've painted trees, so I'm kind of having to remember how I like to paint them, and that's part of why I'm doing these in like smaller pieces rather than the bigger ones. More room for error, and to kind of evaluate my work and see how I'm liking it. We have two Shaynas on here. How unusual. Something odd about this particular paintbrush, this is the same one I used yesterday, the Princeton Long Round. It tends to gather water at the bottom, so I keep dripping on my page. It's a fairly new brush. See, like that. That's fine. No tree's gonna go there anyway, which is kind of unfortunate. I'm not used to that. I gotta watch that more carefully. I'm gonna make sure that our blushes kind of get down here in our base as well. Oh, you can see that I've really gotten dry in here. Right on our edge anyway. I actually don't think this is a good brush for my trees. Actually, Shayna, that's a really good question. And while we're waiting for round one to dry, I will probably just go grab the sketch and I will show you real quick. I think we need a blue guy right in here. And we're going to do a dark green guy. As we start coming forward in our foreground, my colors are going to get darker. Get this a little bit wetter. I can also use the end of my little swatchy thing here to swatch out a color. I didn't use any yellow yesterday, and I do want to add like a buttercup yellow into this, and I don't have anything mixed in that color for them yet. So I want to make sure it was the right color before I drop it down. So a little yellow guy in the front. All right, we're gonna give that a second to dry up for a minute. And let's go take a look at our sketch. So this is going to be our sketch. I'm not a huge fan of very literal artwork. A lot of the samples I looked at with this client had like trees on the bottom of the invitation. I was like, we can do better. So we're going to be adding these trees with some atmospheric perspective on the overlay with a full floral border on it. It's not going to be a border so much as like the foreground, so it's more like looking through wildflowers to see this view. We're going to use a similar view for our envelope liner with our trees in the background and our flowers in the foreground. Trees will be on the front of our envelope, flowers will be in the back, and then we have just the trees for the reply card liner as well. So then as this guy's drying, we can move on to our next one. I'm going to do just a little guy down here at the bottom, since I took up too much room with my big one. I am going to purposefully tint my water a little bit here so I can see where the heck it is. And I kind of like it to have a little bit of a background color. So I'm going to use blues and greens. Yes, the florals are actually already painted. They're the ones that I had to clean up again after sabotaging my own work. Dinah has arrived. Dinah. Hello, cat. The florals are the ones that are like pinks and blues and purples that I've been working on for a few days. So if you didn't catch my story about what happened with that stupid freaking artwork file, Tom was upstairs playing piano, which I really, really love when he does. He's a beautiful pianist. But I asked him not to play a very specific song because it gets freaking stuck in my head for like days and days and days and days. He was doing it just to be a freaking punk on purpose, laughing while he did it. So I was like, no, I've got this. And I just went through the circuit breaker because piano is electric. Not thinking that, oh yeah, my office is on the same breaker. So I turned my computer off and I was not done working on that file. And I had gone through and done a ton of cleanup on that artwork. to then lose almost all of the work I had already put into it because I turned off my own computer while being petulant to him. That is what I get. Karma is a bitch. It's pretty funny though. Okay, that's a wonky looking tree. That's fine. It's in the background. Okay, background wise, we're gonna have another blue one. Alright, start our next one while those guys get dry. I still want my water bluer. That was definitely in my paintbrush. Oops. I actually really prefer to paint with dirty water. Go figure. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna take a look at my two grounds that I have. I've got a green one and I've got a pink one. We're gonna do a blue one. I'm telling you, this paintbrush holds much more water than I anticipate. Oh, Shanna, back up to your question. Of course I'm planning on painting him. Where'd you think I was gonna get him, girl? Clip art? Huh, the horror. Kidding, there's nothing wrong with clip art. Well, depending upon where you get it. But you know the clip art I mean, the horror. That's actually a good point. No, these ones are going to be watercolored. Get some of that green down into our blue. Alright, so this is where I kind of really start to like things, is when I get some bleed and some dry. This just bled into a huge giant mess. So I'm learning a few things here. One is let the first layer dry all the way. Stop being impatient. Me? Impatient? What? Oh, I don't know if I like this paintbrush. Are you acting as paparazzi? My picture is being taken. and see how bottom one is doing. Like maybe it's too much water. So this is why we do trials, to see how our stuff is working and what needs to be changed or altered. Why did I choose wet on wet? I chose wet on wet because I want this really bleedy background to it. The painting that I have done in the past I really love, that's being modeled by the lovely Dinah Cat. Like there's these ones here. So it's really this one. This is one I really like. And to get that nice atmospheric perspective, I find that working wet on wet works a little bit better. So that those ones that are a little bit further away, I just literally went further away, like you can see my hands. The ones that are further away have less detail to them, just like they would if you're seeing them in an actual scene in a view. It's a little bit more realistic. I did specifically ask the client if they wanted like legit looking trees or like tree-ish things. And they're like legit looking trees. I was like, okay. The other thing I'm gonna have to mess with is my scale. Like this guy's like a baby tree, but it's more because I gave myself a baby area to paint because I took up too much space with my other one. I do really love how watercolor bleeds. It's my favorite thing about it. So keeping it wet and working wet I also really like, especially in my foreground where I can then add kind of details and stuff. I would love to be able to just paint a tree without doing my stem essentially first. My, I don't know, what do you call that? The main part of the tree, trunk. There you go, I knew it had a word. But every time I do that, my trees are crooked, like listing over to one side. So I'm not gonna do that. Gonna re-wet just a smidge. So I get a little bleed, but not a ton. Let's get that dog hair out of there. And the other thing I'm going to want to see is two trees painted next to each other of opposing colors. So I'm going to want to put maybe a pink or peach next to one of these two. Dinah, please stop doing whatever it is that you're doing. Dinah, hey, stop that. Thank you. The reason I want to put peach or pink is because I do want those colors to bleed together, so I want to get it down before it dries. Okay, I've decided I don't care for this brush. It holds far too much water. I'm going to go back through, add some darker detail. Going to do the same with my blue guy. Like so. All right. Do you guys, are you kind of seeing a pattern or process here at all? Or does this just seem arbitrary? So I just put a little bit of water down and then blotted it back up again so it's not crazy, crazy wet. How long will it take? Far less time if I don't do it on here, I can tell you that. Once I get this done and I can kind of give myself a pretty good idea of what works and what doesn't work, it'll probably take me maybe 20 minutes. Hey Bijou, it's good to see everybody's names popping back up, everybody I recognize. Keep getting dog hair in my paintbrush, but I don't have any cat paws on in the painting yet, so call that a win. The queen is just sitting here looking at me. Dinah. Dinah. Hi. Oh, no, that wasn't an invitation. No, stay up there. No, shoot. That's what I get. Come on, up. There you go, good girl. Oh, Hayward, I feel ya. I mean, I haven't painted in about a year. And just like the sheer intimidation I was putting 100% on myself was nothing to be trifled with. All right, we're gonna do a little bit more peach, I think. I'm gonna mix them up real quick. I've run out. Now the artwork for the suite overall is heavier on the blue than it is on the blush and coral. So I do need to keep that in mind as I paint these pieces. Oops, sorry. I just added a little pink dude down here. Oh, and lavender. I don't have any lavender on here. I've rearranged my office, and where I used to have a full painting table because I haven't been painting much, it now has a printer sitting on it. So I don't have quite as much space as I'm used to. Getting some lavender. So the lavenders and blues are what the invitation is focusing quite a bit on. I'm not sure how I like this color play between these guys here. So because I'm not really loving the color play, I'm going to look back up at my swatches and see where I have that combination of pinks and greens and purples. This one here. Right, I don't mind it. That is a light green, not the dark green though. We will see how it dries. This so far, my first one, is my least favorite. I told you guys I would smidge. Man, there's a lot of colors in here. All right, so here's wet on dry. And I left it that way on purpose. I'm gonna see if I like it. in this like particular combination and configuration. We're gonna see how it dries, because that will be our determining factor, is what it looks like at the end. I can definitely tell that the green I use behind this is going to be too dark to compete with this pink. That is an ugly tree. That's fine. Going for color more than anything else. All right. So I think this is going to give me enough to work with as far as testing goes. I can tell you, like, what the heck happened here. That nice line, that's awful. I can tell you that my lightest layer needs to be more pronounced and probably bigger, so it doesn't get lost in the foreground. I actually don't mind the wet on dry. I mean, other than the fact that that tree is really ugly. These guys are better. But from this, I can look at different color combinations. I can look at the wet on wet, wet on dry, different paper saturations. Like, I have completely lost some of these background trees because they were really small. But what I need to do is let those dry a little bit more and layer a little bit more intentionally, I think. And I think that'll help. But I'm going to let this dry totally and then come back and take a look at it. I'm going to look at it critically, but not as in I'm criticizing it. I'm going to pick out the pieces I like about it and make sure that I repeat those things that I enjoy. And anything that is just terrible, like this green blob, just make sure I don't do those things again. All right, I'll see you guys later.